I know, right?
It is changed.
You missed it.
Oh, darn. Very difficult. My education is very, wait. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
How about this?
Oh, wow. And then I said, I remember being a little girl and oh, wow. That's what these comments. That's pretty good. Mail it in and then they'll drive there to an interview. Of all the parents, start talking to them. Of course, I'll tell you that. You want some answers? Oh, I have some.
I was very surprised.
I thought I just said that.
Yep.
No, I like it.
I did.
We hope you knocked your socks off.
Anything to get your attention. Well, it's good. It's better than being the other way and you know, have to try so hard. But them doesn't know what it wants to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's probably
Me too.
psychology, counseling.
I have,
Oh.
I have, it's not me. Where I was very basic,
Like a social worker.
Right, I mean, yeah, counseling and things like that that you need.
Where you go search it. Save you.
Master's program.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you never know. We might start taking kids' classes and decide to Yeah. Take a look at it. Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah. Well, right now, unless you did, you get it. So, I couldn't figure it out, so I finally figured it out. And I'm like, let's drop it. I can hear him.
Tough.
I'm surprised I can't hear him.
I didn't want to go away.
On the other side of the windows that overlook the asphalt work. So it kind of, that's where the process.
Very well.
You already missed your turn. Yeah. Yeah.
Good word.
I'm not sure we'll ever get back.
That would be nice. I don't know how I got this spot. I was like, I got here early too, because I think Tracy's practice. I should have just shuffled these around.
You should.
Hey, hold it, over there. Did I hear that? Oh, right, okay, I'll try. Underline.
Good evening. I'll start real quick before we get started, just so you know, you all have mics on the table. If you want to speak, you can press the green button until it turns on. Same thing, Joe, when Jen's ready, we can turn that one on or wherever she wants to be. If your mic dies, you can just let me know, because Dean left me a box of batteries. If you feel like you want to be long-winded. Tonight we are using this camera in front because they're also streaming the basketball game, and we want to take up the YouTube channel. Just first night trying this out. So this is on this Sling camera right here. And see how this goes. Like we said last time, once we get started working remotely or streaming, we'll see what the bugs are and then work on it as we go. Next time we'll be probably streaming out of that window up there and use the actual YouTube channel from school. We'd like to ask you to all put on your masks while you're here, please. It's part of our requirement for being in the building. Then I have to ask you to leave.
No, I'm sorry. I have a right to be here. I'm part of the public.
Yep, and we also have a policy that says that you're going to follow the SOP, you're going to wear a mask.
Actually, no.
Then
You want me to talk?
we'll recess the meeting and then.
Actually, have you heard of the Freedom
We
of
won't start.
Access Act? It's actually in your handbook. Any person shall be permitted to attend any public proceeding. There are no conditions about this. And if you violate this law, you can be fined.
Why is she still gonna be talking without a mask?
Let me go get Ryan to deliver public report, please.
Your choice. But we're not starting the meeting until everybody's compliant.
Maybe it's good to, the purpose of the board is to create and enforce policies. If they're being disregarded, that's the point.
If you guys want me to talk first, and then I'll leave. Or if you're gonna ignore me, okay.
It's a good reminder that we can't get comments from them within the themselves.
So we can't start the meeting until our policies are in compliance.
You do not have a mandatory mask policy. Which
Yes,
is what
actually, we
I'm
do.
gonna talk about if you wanna listen.
Well, we're not starting the meeting, so we're not opening public comment until then. So you can either put on a mask.
I don't have a mask, so I don't wear a mask.
Well, we
I
have
cannot wear a
masks
mask.
right here. You're welcome to have one.
Okay. So, I'm just gonna talk, if you guys wanna just sit there, not start your meeting, I'm just gonna talk. I have your handbook here. Have you guys even read it? The school system, you guys have been deceiving the public all year, making everybody
anybody's not a mask, sitting, what, 8 feet from anybody? She's not harming a damn soul.
Right.
Let's get the meeting.
Pleasure of the board.
And the board has not voted on a mask mandate policy. You delegated that, which you are not allowed to do per your handbook.
Yes, actually, we did.
Just get the meeting started,
It's
Chris.
funny that nobody that's sitting around has a problem.
Call the meeting to order.
I know.
Please join me in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adjustments to the agenda.
There's 7A, new business, staff resignations, added Siebert, grade 3 at Sebastian Valley Elementary School. Staff appointments, Megan Manson, Ed Tech 2, Special Ed EDS. Robert Rozell, Ed Tech 1, Special Ed, Comas Regional High School. The transportation employees agreement, we're going to table that until next meeting. And then we're going to need to add a G, board member exception. We have another one.
Approval of the minutes of January 11th, 2022.
So moved.
Without the,
So moved.
without her mask?
Not bothering anyone.
Oh, my God. But if this board doesn't exist to enforce our policies for our
You
public
don't have a policy.
and for our students, what's the point?
You go in public without a mask, I saw you in town, what is the difference? This is ridiculous.
That's another policy. That's another policy that's not being followed. What are we going to tell our kids when they start following our policies?
Stand up for themselves.
There
Oh,
we
yeah, their board doesn't do their job.
go. To approve the minutes for January 11th.
Motion on the floor to approve the minutes of January 11th,
Second.
seconded by Jason. Any adjustments or corrections?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Under the vaccine clinic, I don't believe that the order, the count may be right, 585, but the names are not, mine is not there. And I did vote against it.
On the same, which was, the minutes state that Ryan, made the motion and I seconded. I did not second. I believe that was for, moving the question. Not yet.
So, Jason, say that again.
The minutes reflect that Ryan made the motion and I seconded. I believe that was for moving the question, not the initial motion. I'm not sure who made the motion. I'm positive I didn't second.
It's really hard to hear you all with the screaming of the game in the background.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So if Ryan made it, you didn't second it, Jason. Does anybody remember seconding the motion? Celia? I'll put Celia in there. Okay. I got it. And then the voting, change the numbers to reflect the positives and the negatives, and put Robin in there. Okay. I'll make those amendments with Evelyn.
Any other additions or corrections to those amendments? All in favor? Any opposed? Public comment? Go ahead.
Want to come down and use the mic, please?
So I wanted to talk today about amending our current SOP, like a lot of schools in the state of Maine are doing right now. A lot of them are the bigger schools with a larger population that are amending the SOP to better suit the community that they serve, such as South Portland, Lewiston, Auburn, Gorham is on that list. Hamden Academy is looking at adopting some changes with theirs as well, because they're currently surveying their students and their parents. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting on the survey is the question that's proposed is not to the parent, but to the student to complete. And it can be done in school, it can be done online, it can be done by paper. But talking to a bunch of parents and two of the teachers that are there, one of the feedbacks that is the majority of the students that's being proposed is they don't know who their teachers are outside of the classroom, because all they can see is the top of their nose and their eyes. So I thought it was interesting, and I asked my own child, and I asked some neighbors and their children, and they could not pick their actual teacher up out of a lineup. And I know this because my son's very smart. He's on the honor roll, he's 14, he's in 8th grade. And all of his teachers that he's had so far, when we have seen them in public and seen them in the community, he used to go up and hug his teachers, and he doesn't even know who they are anymore. So when this happened on Thursday evening last week, I asked him, I said, do you remember seeing this teacher at Hannaford when we were grocery shopping? And he said, oh my gosh, Mom, I haven't seen her in 3 years. If I would have known who that was, I would have went up and said hello to her and asked her how her baby was. I haven't seen her in so long. And to me, we're failing. That is tragic. If you can't pick your teacher up or your helper in your classroom at a grocery store because they've been masked for so long, you don't even know who's actually trying to educate you in the classroom, that is a fail. And a fail in the biggest possible way. These are people they should gravitate to. If they have questions, comments, concerns, problems of any nature, that's who they should feel safe with. But how are they doing that if they don't know who to go to because they don't know what their face looks like? That's a problem. We need to fix that. And I think this board really needs to amend the SOP to make that happen. We all know, we've heard the CDC guidelines and we've heard recommendations, but that's all these are recommendations. These are not requirements by the state of Maine. Not requirements proposed by our governor or the SOP. It is a recommendation. We need to do better and amend our SOP so this recommendation is taken under consideration, but we're using safe practices so they don't have to wear this and be confined, and they know who their classroom is. They know who their friends are. When a new student comes in, they can see a smile so they don't feel like they're, the new person on the block, so they don't know who to have a conversation with, because a smile brings a lot of conversation and a lot of opening, and we're not having that right now. And it's really sad. So the State of Maine COVID-19 Response Office of the Governor clearly states that the CDC only requires that people wear a mask in public transportation such as planes, buses, and trains. That has nothing to do with this property. There's no requirement. Again, we need to do better. It is not in schools. There is over 40 states now without a mask mandate, including this great state of Maine. What are we doing? If you really think that this is helping with the spike that we've had over the last few months, you're wrong. Vaccinated people and non-vaccinated people side by side are being sent home because they are symptomatic or they're sick and they're not coming to school. This protects absolutely no one. We're already social distancing in classrooms. We're already masking going outside. The only time that we're not fully masking is in the gymnasium for some reason, that's the place that transmission would be possible because you're elbow to elbow with people, not wearing a proper mask. And I know that because I've watched the games and I've seen the footage, and this is what the students look like. This is what the parents look like. This is helping absolutely no one if you're implementing a mask structure that is not working. So why are we doing it? And I thought it was really interesting that some of the larger states that we have, like California, New Jersey, and Delaware, the big push for all of these masks are ending their mask mandates completely in all schools going forward in March. Why can we not, as a district, stand up for our kids and our community members and do better? We're missing the boat. And the boat belongs to this room right here of you people and 2 that have left, which is absolutely ridiculous, because if social mandates are what we're requiring to stay apart 3 to 6 feet, what is someone up there doing to someone down here? It is no different than me seeing community members on this board that are in Hannaford, Walmart, going to Urban Air, going to trampoline parks with their children without masks, and I have seen it. So if you can do that in a public setting with sweat and spit and everything else, what are we doing to our kids that are still being kept 3 feet apart? I encourage you all to really think long and hard about the mental health for our students and do better and make a change. This needs to happen before it's too late. And if you want to put that COVID money somewhere, why don't you hire an actual counselor or someone in a mental health profession to come into this school and assess the children that are struggling? Because there is a large majority of the kids that really need some help, and we're too worried about telling them to pull their damn mask over their nose. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm Angela from Newport. Like I said at the beginning, there is a freedom of access law that is in your guys' handbook, and it says that any person shall be permitted to attend a public proceeding, and there is no conditions with that. And if you violate the law, you can be fined. I have read all 23 pages of that handbook. Have you guys? Because it doesn't seem like you're following it. I'm going to quote some stuff for you. So, like I said before, page 2-2, a board can adopt a policy upon recommendations of the superintendent, but the final decision on policy cannot be delegated. Board set policy, the responsibility of implementing policy is delegated to the superintendent of schools. The school board has not made a policy requiring masks in school. You voted in August to delegate the responsibility of making a policy on masks to the superintendent when we are in red. You cannot do that. There are policies in place for a reason. This handbook voids any decision the superintendent has put forth regarding the policy on mask mandates in this district. 2-13, the board is a legislative policy-making body that is responsible for the development and adoption of policy. The implementation of policy is an administrative task to be performed by the superintendent and staff. 3-1, the board's role is legislative. The superintendent serves as an educational leader and the school's unit chief administrator. This stuff must be important because it's in the handbook many, many times. Code BHC from your own policies. The legislation of policies is the most important function of a school board, that the execution of the policy should be the function of the superintendent. Now, the board has not voted on an actual policy to mandate masks in the school. You delegated it and you cannot do that. Code BGR, the board's policy committee, is charged with reviewing and recommending all new policies and policy changes to be considered upon the board. So if you wanted to go forward from now, upon recommendation from the policy committee, the first reading of a new policy, revision or deletion of policy shall be placed on the agenda of a regular board meeting. Board members shall receive the policy, supporting material, if appropriate, and any written recommendations in advance of meeting date. The policy committee chair will explain the purpose, policy, or policy change. The board may discuss the substance of the policy proposal, and a vote shall be held to acknowledge the first reading of the policy. Any changes to the policy agreed by consensus by vote on a motion to amend shall be made prior to the second reading. C, at a subsequent regular meeting, no sooner than 2 after the first reading, the policy shall be placed on the agenda for second reading and action. Amendments may be introduced and acted upon. If a main motion to approve the policy is not passed at such a meeting by a majority of vote by board members present and voting, the policy for the process for the policy is ended. So if you started tonight because you don't have a policy right now, you could put it on the board meeting for March. And then you'd have to wait 2 meetings after that, which would be the end of the school year. So legally, if you're following your policies and the laws, you don't have a mask mandate for the rest of the year.
Anyone else? Thank you. Reading of communications.
The only three communications I got, I think it needs to be passed on, would be that when we changed the SOP to have 5 days of isolation instead of 10, I had 3 teachers that emailed me, and those are the first 3 teachers that have emailed me all year. They were concerned about the ability of younger kids to be able to wear their masks and their own safety. They asked for us to extend the isolation from 5 days to 10 days, and they also asked that they got a chance to wear N95 masks. I said I'm not the authority to be able to change the SOP without board support. I didn't think that we would want to continue to isolate students for up to 10 days. However, I did say that Leisha and I could provide them with N95 masks. And they appreciated that, and I also said that I would pass on their communication to you guys, and they also appreciated that. So, if I'd heard from teachers all year long, we would have heard about it. Those are the first 3 teachers that have ever expressed that. That's my communication. My report is very brief. I would just want to say that it's unfortunate when I have to continue to bring sad news to the board. Last month it was Duke, and this month it's Kim Martin. She served as an ed tech here at the high school for 19 years. It's just a tragedy to have to bring those things forward to the board. The rest of my report will be under the other reports.
All right. That moves us to budget and finance, which is our audit presentation.
I assume this is still on?
It is.
Okay. Thanks for having me. You should have a presentation in front of you that looks like this. And I am here to report on the results of the fiscal year 2021 audit. Sorry? Okay, sorry. And I would would like to say that the audit did go well this year. We ran into a couple of hiccups, including the software conversion. But Joe did, and the staff were very accommodating. They had a lot of the information ready for us when we showed up. If they didn't have it, then they worked tirelessly to get it to us shortly thereafter. So despite all the challenges, it went pretty well. Usually when I go through this, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to jump in and I can address those. So on the second page, we have an overview of the audit itself. For the timing of the audit, we were here to do some pre-audit on June 9th and 10th. At that time, we usually gather information for the audit. We do some testing of internal controls, and we do some testing of compliance. And then we came back the week of October 11th for the audit itself, and the final reports were issued and dated of January 20th. As far as the financial statements themselves, they did receive an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion on your financial statements. Besides the audit of the numbers as they appear on the financial statements, we are also required to do testing under government auditing standards. Under that guidance, we are required to do testing of laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements, as well as we do some testing of internal controls as they relate to financial reporting. And under that testing, the RSU received no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. A material weakness would be the highest level of a finding. That would basically mean that you have a systemic problem. The next step down from that would be a significant deficiency, where it's just serious enough that we would bring that to your attention. So all we really have are just some minor recommendations. So overall, very good results. We were also required to do some testing under the uniform guidance. Because the RSU received and spent over $750,000 in federal grants, you're required to undergo what's called a single audit. So we have to come in and test some of your larger federal grants. And under those requirements, we did test the Child Nutrition Cluster, which is the school lunch program, the Coronavirus Relief Funds, and the Title I program. And under those requirements, there were also no compliance findings, no material weaknesses, or significant deficiencies. And I did want to point out that the RSU did have a finding last year for the school lunch program. We did retest that issue this year, and there were no findings in that area this year. So again, a very clean audit for compliance purposes. The next few graphs we have on here are focusing on the general fund, looking at the numbers themselves from the financial statements. We usually focus on the general fund because that is where your main operations are for the RSU. And on page 3, we have a graph of the general fund balance over the last 5 fiscal years, and it's broken down into the different categories. So you can see there's a portion of the fund balance that is committed. That balance is the amounts that have been set aside in capital reserves. There's an assigned fund balance, and that is a portion of the balance to be used in next year's budget, as well as the amount that was carried forward at the Dixon local allocation. And then the last part of the fund balance is the unassigned fund balance, and that's the portion that is left over after you have put amounts into those other categories. It's the portion of your fund balance that's carried forward to be used for any purpose. And total fund balance over the last 5 years has actually increased $4.8 million. And the FY21 fund balance increased by about $1.6 million. And then we'll kind of go into the reasons as to why fund balance increased. On the 4th page, we have an overview of the general fund revenues. It's a budget to actual comparison. So looking at some of the larger variances, you can see that other intergovernmental revenues were higher than budgeted. And that was because the RSU received higher than anticipated reimbursements for state agency clients and main care. Sometimes those amounts are difficult to anticipate. Interest revenue was higher than budgeted due to an increase in the cash balances that were held. Other revenues were also higher than budgeted due to receipt of unbudgeted refunds, miscellaneous revenues, and the proceeds from the sale of school property. In total, revenues exceeded the budget by about $157,000, which was less than 1% of the total budget. Actually works out to be about 0.5%. On the next page, we have the general fund expenditures, again looking at the budget to actual variances. For regular instruction expenditures, they were under budget as teachers who left were replaced with teachers lower on the salary scale, as well as there was one unfilled position. Special education expenditures were under budget due to unfilled positions, which was based on student population needs, and budgeted but unused contingency. Other instruction was approximately $208,000 under budget, and that was due to the fact that events were canceled due to COVID. Student and staff support expenditures were also under budget due to a decrease in professional development due to COVID, and as well as the fact that some of the budgeted costs were actually paid for with grant funds. Transportation costs were almost $300,000 under budget, due to reduction in the number of in-person learning days, as well as the RSU received better fuel efficiency with new buses. Facilities maintenance expenditures were under budget due to unfilled positions. And overall, total expenditures were about $1.9 million under budget, which represents about 6.3% under the budget. And I did want to also point out at the very bottom there, you'll see a line called transfers out, and that represents the amount that is transferred to the school lunch program. The only amount that was actually transferred out this year was to cover some of the student balances that were written off, and actually the school lunch program has a positive balance in it of about $102,000. On page 6, we have a graph of the general fund unassigned fund balance as a percentage of budget. So you can see that unassigned fund balance has increased quite a bit from the prior fiscal year to about 12%. State law does prohibit school districts from carrying forward more than 3% of undesignated fund balance. The 2021 unassigned fund balance does exceed the state limits for FY 2021. Now in FY '22, that threshold does actually increase under state law, which I believe will be 9%. However, the current unassigned fund balance does still exceed that threshold. So the RSU will have to work to maybe get that unassigned fund balance down. You do typically have about 3 years to spend that down. The next graph is the general fund revenue distribution, and this is a comparison of local assessments to intergovernmental revenues. We found that there is usually a direct correlation between the two types of revenues. As you can see, over the past 4 fiscal years, local assessments have decreased. They went from about 44% down to a little under 39%. Whereas intergovernmental revenues increased from about 55% to 61%. Those intergovernmental revenues are made up of state subsidy, your agency client reimbursements, and the main care reimbursements. The next couple of graphs are the expenditure distribution graphs. On page 8, we have the 2021 expenditure distribution, and then on the following page, we have the same presentation for 2020, so that you can kind of compare the 2 fiscal years. What this is each expenditure category is expressed as a percentage of total expenditures. So you can see that the biggest piece of the pie would be regular instruction, followed by special education, and then debt service. And to give you an idea of how these compare to the prior year, regular instruction increased by 1%, system administration actually decreased by 3%, and debt service actually increased by 2%. And then all of the other categories stayed relatively the same. And the state of Maine website, they do actually have these percentages available, so you can see how that the RSU compares to state averages for these different categories. And that's it for what I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments for me?
I'd say no. Thank you very much. If there are questions that you come up with after the fact, I'm sure, can email and get an
Yes.
answer.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure that everybody, but anyway,
If any board member would like the full audit with both books, it's right in that box in front of David. So, one is the Regional School Unit Annual Financial Report, and the other one is report required for government auditing standards and uniform guidance. Those are both in that box if you want them. Thank you very much, Jen. If we have any questions, we'll shoot them through Joe down to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you for driving up. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
be careful with this.
We have also developed a budget schedule that has been passed out to the committee, and it appears that our next budget meeting is going to be Monday, February 28th.
Joe, do you have to accept that audit? Let me check my motions.
So I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Who seconded it?
Veronica.
Approve the audit.
And any discussions on that?
How long have you had that company ago on it?
7
Jen's been here since I've been here, right?
at least.
6 years.
Been 2 cycles.
Yeah.
They do a way better job than the previous. Yeah.
And Joe, the budget has actually already been forwarded to the state, right? Because that has to go off like this one.
Say that again.
The audit has already been forwarded to the state, right?
The audit from forward sent to the state once it's complete, yep.
All right. So all in favor of approving the audit? Oh, questions?
So if it's an easy answer for Joe, if not, I guess I don't need it. Just the system administration, what's in that cost? Was there a reason that went down in half?
Yeah, so the big item there is so in that system administration is the superintendent's office, the business office, and the school board cost. The big item in there that decreased is in the prior year, we purchased new financial software, and obviously that wasn't in the current budget. So that was a big drop.
All in favor of approving the audit? Any opposed? Motion carries, audit's approved. You said the next meeting is 22nd? 28th, that's right, this 22nd is the first one. Okay, building committee.
All right, our first item was the discussion about the field across the street from the Etna Dixmont School. It's been an ongoing discussion, and the majority of the committee had voted to hang on to it and to have Mike at some time in the future speak with the first selectman in Etna, see what they wanted to do with it. And so that's on hold right now. And as far as Somerset Water, it's piped to the entrance, and where the addition's going to be constructed, they're going to begin construction in the spring. Submittals for contractors are being sent to Haley Ward, and the specifications will be sent to us soon, and let's see. And there was also a replacement, a fixture that was covered under the change order for the project. It was pretty bad, rusted, and that was it. Any questions?
Education committee?
No meeting.
No meeting. Policy committee, I'll take the first item for first reading is telephone services that's up. This is an old policy from when we had telephones in the classrooms themselves. Now almost everybody has cell phones. So what we're recommending is to simply discontinue this policy. And the other one is a job description for a literacy specialist, which was providing a detail that we did not have in our previous description. So,
I'd like to make a motion to accept the policy for second reading.
Second.
any discussion on the policy?
Yeah, I thought there were phones in the rooms. Are there no phones in the room, Mike?
There's phones in the rooms, but we don't have to deal with long distance calls. This policy.
They all wired.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Yes, there's phones in the classrooms, every classroom. However, this policy dealt with long distance calls, and right now we don't have every staff member write down what long distance calls he makes, because almost every call is provided for, or they call it on their own cell phone. So we don't have to track down fees and write down who made what long distance phone call, which is exactly what that policy is. It's obsolete. But yes, we have phones in every classroom.
Anything else? All right, seeing none, those in favor of accepting the policies for second reading? Any opposed? Motion carries. The other two policies that we're currently looking at are relations of school resource officers with law enforcement authorities, specifically recasting that with our current security title. And the other one that we're looking at is a system-wide student code of conduct that we have that was, again, hadn't been reviewed in a while and was becoming somewhat obsolete. Transportation Committee.
No meeting.
Tri-County.
So, we met last Thursday, we spoke about
So anyway, yeah, we talked about the Bridge Academy. They're planning to have a luncheon for Maine Bridge Academy students and planning an informational night coming up for parents to generate interest for the participation for next year's cohort for the Bridge Academy. If you don't know, it's college credits for our high school students. They would like to have at least 20 to 30 students involved next year. And as we know, college is expensive and these credits are well deserved. We spoke about the automotive class at UTC. Mr. Pelletier spent the day at UTC assisting them. And we have, the students are fortunate to have the access to that facility and his expertise. So we also talked about the middle school experience. They're going to have students from Ridgeview. They're still developing the procedure, what they're going to do, but it's going to be more than just a visit to Tri-County. It's going to be an immersive experience so they can actually see what school is like at a technical school. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully they'll be starting that in March. Like I said, still working on what that program is going to look like and what the curriculum is going to be. Update on the aviation program. Not much to say. They have talked with the state. There's no schools currently in the state that have the aviation program. There are 3 schools in New Hampshire. I recommended that we reach out to them and find out how they're dealing with it. He did look into our insurance, and they said they weren't going to cover such a program. So that is yet to be ironed out. As you know, it takes a long time to develop a new program with CTE, so I don't expect to see anything in the next year or 2, but know that we're still looking at it. And we are working on swapping over to a standards-based education through there, so they're currently working on that and developing that, what that's going to look like, and trying to model that through being in line with the rest of the schools too, and how that's going to interact with the grading systems. So, any questions? Anything to add, Mike?
I would just say that there's a couple of long-term people who are retiring. Mr. Walsh and Mrs. Walsh from graphic design, and John Way in buildings and trades. And this Thursday we're going to start to sit down with the team and work on the budget. So that's Thursday night. So hopefully we'll have those figures as soon as possible so we can plug those into our other budget. But no, let's put it. Robin?
As far as insurance goes, I'm sure that maybe part of the conversation with the New Hampshire people will be where they get their insurance.
Yes, yeah. I find it interesting that they'll insure 17-year-olds driving 90,000-pound tractor trailers and not piloting airplanes. But another thing I wanted to bring up is we looked at the audit. I looked at this pie graph, and you'll see it's CTE. CTE takes up 0% of our annual budget. I'd like to see that improved. 15% special education as a comparison. We need more CTE. We need to push this and stop pushing college.
But keep in mind, one of the reasons that's 0 is because the state now does it as a pass-through instead of coming through our budget.
Yep, but again, it's just it's a good indicator. If you even look at what we spend yearly, it's a drop in the bucket, and we don't push it enough. I've been in the industry for 23 years. We are dying for kids, for young people to start working, and we're pushing them into debt to college. We need to change that message. It's too late.
Negotiations committee? Okay, extracurricular, pandemic,
How's that? I think I asked for these. So, the moment everyone's been waiting for. Pandemic committee met last night and discussed a few things. We started by discussing changes to the SOP, which aligned with the US CDC isolation and quarantine, and had the effect of reducing the isolation time from 10 days to 5 days for positive cases, after which a student or staff member could return to school if the symptoms had resolved. And also exempted from school quarantine requirements close contacts if they met a number of conditions, including being fully vaccinated, participating in pool testing, or if the school enforced a mandatory masking policy. It was reported to us that this has resulted in a reduced number of quarantines and a reduction in absenteeism from the school. For instance, the example was provided at Somerset Elementary, where absenteeism had been as high as, I believe, if my number's correct, 25% this fall. And that had come down to, I believe, 15%, which is still high, but obviously much better than the 25% that we were experiencing with the previous SOP. We also discussed pool testing, which has begun, I believe, in its second round at the Dixmont Plymouth School, and is very limited in its scale because the minimum size for a pool is 5 students. And individuals who had tested positive in the past 90 days either, I guess, have the option to opt out.
They're
Or automatically opted out. And therefore, with the number of students or individuals, I should say, who have had COVID in the school, I believe that they've had 2 pools that they've run on each of the twice, each time. We discussed how, you know, this was in some ways meant to be a pilot program to gain some experience. And so there was no, we sort of bandied about the idea of, well, is it still worth it? And it seemed to be for the purpose of a pilot program, at least that it would be still worth it. We also discussed that there has been some anecdotal evidence of in-school transmission. Examples were given at the Dixmont Plymouth School and Sebasticook, and this is unlike what we're experiencing last year. And then finally, we discussed the future of the mandatory masking policy in light of a number of states, including in the Northeast, having announced that they would be rolling back state mandates for masking in school, which Maine does not have, in favor of local decisions based on local conditions, which Maine does have. And during that discussion, it was noted that the implementation of the new SOP is guided in part by whether or not there is a universal masking policy in place. And I believe that summarizes the discussion of our meeting. And if I could just provide a follow-up. Of course, when I got home, first thing I thought to do was to look up the New Jersey Department of Health and their statement regarding the rollback of the state mandate. And, you know, it was interesting. they essentially, what the statement said is that they would be rolling back the mandatory policy and plans would be put in place to localize the decision based on local conditions. And they would be doing this in mid-March. And the justification for it was a declining number of case numbers, which I looked up, and New Jersey is currently at half the case rate of Maine. And then I also read a report about some of the other states, and just as another example, in Massachusetts, where they have also mandated masking in schools, they are looking at rolling back that state mandate based on vaccination rates in school. So currently, the plan would be if a school achieves 80% vaccination rate, then they would be allowed to remove the mandatory masking. And, you know, I certainly don't have the time to learn all of the different guidelines in place in all of the different states. I think we have to be careful about just, you know, picking some headlines out and saying, oh, well, look at what that state is doing without understanding a little bit more context within which they're making those decisions. And with that, I'll end my report.
That moves us on to new business and staff resignations.
Yes, we had Adrian Roundy at Tech 3 at Special Ed, Somerset, Sheldon Madigan, bus driver, Jennifer Engelhardt, van driver, Peter Marshall, custodian, Deb Stewart, server, and Nick Seaver, grade 3, insurance, Vassar Valley High School.
Sheldon, second.
So are these effective immediately, or what's that do for our staff?
Well, I believe if you look at the appointments, you've got Sarah Kewen coming on as a van driver, Thomas Eaton coming on, Dave Gilbert we have to discuss with Veronica, Jacob Betty's coming on, Megan Manson and Barbara Rosell are all at Techs coming back in to fill those positions, custodians, van drivers.
Okay, so we don't have any staff nominations, then the staff appointments are,
Just what I just listed up.
and those are informational, we don't need to act on those. Staff transfers,
Yeah, those are just necessarily some where people wanted to be, and also some people where we needed to move them to cover classes that needed ed techs. But more likely a number 2 there with Tony Moran going over to from the middle school to the high school.
and so,
Chris.
yeah. Sorry about that. So, transportation employment agreement is tabled for next month, and do you want to do the board member exception first?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah. I'll get her over.
here's the board. All right, so,
Yep, I can explain this.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Dean's trying to fill the spots, and I wasn't, you know, I didn't know Veronica's father's name, but when it came through that he wanted to be a bus driver or a sub van driver, Dean wanted to get a hold of him. And in the past, we've had a board member who has had a parent who's been a bus driver, so it's pretty well disconnected, kind of like it was for Mel, you know, the last one where somebody had their parent was an ed tech and they're not directly supervising and they're not, you know, Veronica's willing to back off the negotiations. I don't know how long her father, you know, Dean is. Dean's going to pick somebody up, he's going to fill a hole, and the person will stay as long as they want, and if they want to leave, they can. But I think, as in our last exception, we want to have Dean fill his slots for van drivers and bus drivers, and I think we want to keep board members who are involved and committed on board. So. Anything else you want to add to that, Brian?
No? Yeah, just to build on what you said about negotiations, as soon as I found out my father was interested in this position, I made the committee and the chair and the superintendent aware and removed myself from that group's negotiations. So if there's any questions or concerns on that, certainly let me know.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the exception.
Mike, so moved.
No one can hear you.
I'm not speaking right now.
Kim.
Oh,
Sorry. I'll entertain a motion to approve the exception.
So moved.
Second.
Robin and Jason. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the exception? Any opposed? Motion carries. The last item on the agenda is the superintendent's evaluation, which the board will do in executive session. So I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to MRSA 4056A.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of entering executive session? Thank you. So we're in executive session, and that everybody except board members have to clear up. Thank you.
Did you get the lowdown, assuming you don't want to strain executive session?
No.
Are you going to do the agenda items after the executive session?
I don't know if I know how to turn it off. That just streamed out.
Gary, can you just press the button?
Thanks, Jenny. That's helpful. Press a button.
I didn't mean to sound rude.
Well, I can press a lot of buttons. I just don't know if they're the right buttons.
Push on.
Might zoom in to just one of you.
That way, not. As long as it's Mike.
Just like, it's just a sling, yeah.